Hello. So I wanted to make a bit of an unscripted video talking about something that's been bothering me for a little bit. Um, I think at the end of the day, people are free to have their own sort of opinions about weapon balancing. That's the cool part about, having a community around a video game is that, inevitably people are going to disagree. And I think that's where, productive discussion goes on. But something that I have seen floating around recently is the idea that Bolter is weak and that it needs to be buffed. Just for the record, I don't think this is true at all. What happened in my eyes was that the pinning fire blessing, so we can see here, this is giving us 5% power for every enemy that you stagger, stacks 5 times. This was nerfed. When that happened, essentially what happened is that the old Bolter playstyle of pressing F and mag dumping like this, that died off because you no longer have as much power as you did before. What happened instead though was that Bolter actually technically got buffed. So they buffed the finesse values for Bolter. So that's obviously crit and weak spot damage. But what I've found is that because of these finesse damage increases, Bolter went from being a weapon that, you sort of spray and pray. It went from being that sort of weapon to actually being more of a, it's similar to a headhunter, I guess. With more of an emphasis on actually hitting weak spots in the first place. And that's where the majority of your damage is going to be. Because they buffed finesse, crit on Bolter is actually really strong now, and both veteran and zealot have pretty easy ways of getting it as well. So on my other screen, I'm just going to pull it up right now. So this is the Darktide breakpoint calculator. Essentially what this is telling me is how much damage I'm doing per shot while I'm scoped in. So this is probably my ideal role. Obviously every and 80 in every stat, flak and maniac. Unfortunately, I have locked in crit. This is the problem with making unscripted videos, that Stephanie starts talking. Right, so I don't have flak damage as a perk, unfortunately, but I do have maniacs, and I do have pinning fire and surgical. I think this by far is probably the best setup. So the issue with shattering impact is that Bolter actually gets very little value out of brittleness. I'll try and get a clip of how much rending actually buffs your damage, but suffice to say it's not a whole lot. And I might even compare it as well, compare the damage with guaranteed crit from surgical versus the brittleness from shattering impact. That used to be the way to go, but I think what ended up happening was that they ended up changing the ADMs, the armor damage modifiers for Bolter somehow, alongside the finesse damage increase. And something that's sort of quite important to mention as well is that crits inherently have a sort of almost like a rending effect, where if you crit, you're naturally going to do more damage into armor. So the funny thing about Bolter now is that it's so strong you don't actually need any source of brittleness or rending to do damage, which is cool. Glory Hunters, basically useless. We can see on the veteran talent tree that we basically already have Glory Hunter. Yeah, we've got confirmed kill, which is basically doing the exact same thing but better, and we don't have to waste a blessing slot to take it. It's just a 2-point investment, and these 2 points are pretty good, all things considered. I take them on pretty much every build that I run. Inspiring Barrage, again, kind of useless. You don't want to be mag dumping in the first place, at least not in my opinion. I don't think that's how bolters should be used. That is sort of a relic of, like, Darktide 2 years ago, basically. Darktide before they did a big bunch of weapon balancing patches. Cavalcade is good, but I feel like specifically for a veteran, having essentially 100% uptime on crits with surgical is so strong that Cavalcade sort of loses its value. I feel like Zealot probably gets more value out of Cavalcade, and I'd rather have that blessing on a bolter if I was playing Zealot, for example. Somebody's already made, Telopots has already made a bolter guide for Zealot that's, you know, worth checking out. So if you're interested in that, I would highly recommend going to visit his video instead. But I think for the most part, surgical is a lot stronger on veteran. You are, 10% crit chance for every 0.25 seconds while aiming. If you build around crits on the veteran talent tree, which is actually pretty easy to do for the most part, it's not very hard to almost guarantee every shot will crit in the first place. So I quite literally just take Deadshot and Reciprocity, and I think that would probably get you close enough. Because surgical, like you can see, just the small amount of time that I aimed there, and I already had 50% crit chance on that shot. So you don't even have to space your shots out all that long either. It's just a natural sort of a natural playstyle for the weapon now, I think. Yeah. So looking back at the breakpoints, so we sort of established that I think this is for the most part what we want. You could slot either of these out for unyielding, depending on what you're planning to do. I just don't think, like, the issue with the unyielding perk on bolt guns specifically, at least in my opinion, is that you can already take, bring it down. So this is doing pretty much the exact same thing. This is basically just a free weapon perk. And this is obviously the same for elites as well. So it's not super important. But you know, the options there if you want. But I think in general this is probably going to be the strongest setup for it by far. And if we have a look at the breakpoints, so we are actually one-shotting trappers on a weak spot. You don't even have to crit to hit that breakpoint, which is good to know. Same with Dreg shotgunners. Bear in mind too, when we're looking at the Darktide breakpoint calculator, this is purely without any of the talent nodes. I think, as far as I'm aware, they have no plans to add them to this breakpoint calculator. It might be a lot of work. So bear in mind too that you've got a lot of range damage nodes around this tree. You've got stuff like close quarters kill zone, marksman, the weak spot damage. All of these things are sort of throwing a wrench, especially with marksman focus as well. All of these sort of miscellaneous talent tree or talent nodes around the tree are throwing a wrench in these breakpoints. But this is just to give you an idea of how strong the weapon is, even without investing any points. So yeah, we're heading, you know, Scab Trapper breakpoint, Scab Shotgunner breakpoint, very easily clears body shot breakpoints, which is huge in a game that has arm shots. Reapers are a 4-shot just on weak spot without even critting. I would say bring it down, and the weak spot damage, long shot, those sorts of nodes, plus executioner's stance would probably turn this into a 2-shot or a 1-shot breakpoint, because they are that strong. Crusher, the damage looks pretty bad, but I can assure you it's not as bad as you think it is. We get the Scab Gunner, 1-shot breakpoint on weak spot, which is huge. Same with Scab Shotgunners. Snipers, we can actually body shot them, which is quite funny. Flamers are a little harder to kill, but I think just long shot or the weak spot damage would get you this breakpoint. So that's basically another guaranteed one, no matter what build you're running. So you can see, you know, I mean, I'm going to hazard a guess and say that if somebody's watching this video, they probably already know this, but just for reference, maulers are taking more damage on a crit body shot than they are on a crit weak spot, which is good. Makes your job a lot easier. You don't really have to aim for heads when you're fighting maulers. With the elite damage, weak spot damage, long shot, executioner stance, I could see this becoming a 2-shot or a 1-shot as well. Dread Rages, we can see here, this could potentially become a 1-shot breakpoint. I have a feeling it would probably depend on marksman's focus stacks. We can see we already 1-shot Tox Bombers. Much like Reapers, Bulwarks could probably become a 2-shot as well. And Hounds, I would say we probably clear that 1-shot breakpoint too. So you can see, like, that's basically most of the important enemies in the game. Just for reference too, it definitely doesn't struggle against bosses either. The main thing sort of holding you back when fighting bosses with this sort of build for Bolter is obviously just hitting the weak spot in the first place. I think Beast of Nurgle and Plague Ogrins are sort of self-explanatory, but Chaos Spawn is a little bit of a different story just because his head tends to jump around so often. That can make it quite hard. So it's a bit of a skill cap there, trying to up your sort of time to kill on an erratic boss like that. So we've looked at breakpoints, and just for reference, I'm going to spawn in some of these enemies just to make sure that I'm not lying to you. So I'm thinking, so there was a body shot sniper breakpoint. Yep. I'll do it again just to make sure. Yep. So we know that's true. Can we 1-shot shotgunners on a weak spot hit? We can. Very cool. Let's see. What about these are scab gunners? We just missed that breakpoint, and if we look at the breakpoint calculator, well, no, hang on, that's because I don't have flak. I don't have flak on this roll. Yeah, no, my bolter isn't perfect, sadly, but flak would get you that breakpoint. So you can see how strong the weapon is, even without any talents at all. It's kind of crazy. And then you start to go down the tree, and you look and you go, okay, so, you know, pretty much, like, everywhere there's something juicy to pick up that'll buff the damage of your ranged weapon in some way. So what I want to show you guys really quickly is I've sort of played around with Bolter for quite a while now. I'm definitely, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not the first person to do this at all, but I just thought it was worth making a video about it because it's sort of frustrating seeing some of the hot takes that people sort of have put on Reddit and other forums about this weapon. So you can definitely squeeze out a lot more damage in this build. For example, you could go down here and take free Ogren damage. This might get you like a Reaper or a Bulwark breakpoint. You could also take the 10% rending. I think 10% rending would still do something for Bolter, for sure. But I think Onslaught is a bit of a waste of time. This is just sort of what I've found to be the best setup for me, personally. I like Duck and Dive because it basically means infinite uptime on Deadshot. Deadshot is one of those talents that people sort of misunderstand. Deadshot will make the Bolter actually usable. It's kind of crazy. I don't think people understand just how strong spread reduction type talents are in a game like this. Dance of Death is, you know, still a little bit underrated to this day. You never see anybody talk about it, even though it's one of those talents that's actually quite transformative for Zealot. And that Dance of Death is doing a similar thing without the crit or the stamina consumption. But what is Deadshot giving us? It's giving us plus 25% crit chance and sway reduction while using our ranged weapons alternate fire. So the alternate fire is just scoping, so just holding down right click with your ranged weapon out, but you lose stamina every second. The cool thing about this talent is that you can dip over here, so we get some suppression, which doesn't, I mean, who cares, right? Like, it's not doing anything for you. Melee damage, which is fine. It's kind of cute. And what do we see here? Oh, plus 30% stamina on avoiding ranged attacks by dodging, sprinting, or sliding. So instantly we've got a cool synergy here, where all of a sudden, we have basically infinite uptime on Deadshot so long as we are dodging shooters, and there's shooters on the screen in the first place. And you can see when I hold down the alternate fire, you can see my stamina bars slowly draining, and I'll sprint around for a bit so you can see what happens when it gets to 0. So we're at 0%, and my recoil sort of goes all over the place, sort of janks out. Yeah, so this build that I'm using, it's using marksman's focus. So the idea is that I'm stacking ranged finesse power. You know, for the smart ones among you, you might have already picked up that that's sort of something that Bolter really, really wants, because, you know, we scale our damage with finesse. So we've got that, we've got elite damage, which could be getting us some cool little breakpoints. Maybe we get like a body shot gunner breakpoint, I'm not entirely sure. Deadshot, obviously. Deadshot with surgical essentially just means guaranteed crit. The weapon perk is probably overkill at this point, but you can see like this bolter is borderline perfect apart from that, so I'm sort of stuck with what I have for now. We've got long shot, which is giving us 20% base range damage, which is pretty cool. We've got a node here. We have execution stance, which is giving us plus 25% range damage and ranged weak spot damage, and our spread and recoil are greatly reduced, which is huge for bolter. I take for the Emperor just because it seems like a sort of a no-brainer pick out of these three, but every time that we use our ability, we're getting some extra range damage there as well. And we have, because of the recent buff to the cooldown for XC stance, this is essentially always up, so long as there are specialist or elite type enemies on the screen. Even just regular shooters, this will always be up when you combine it with tactical awareness, which is probably one of the strongest parts about this setup at the moment. So I think that's pretty much everything that has an impact on our damage, but I want to show off just how strong this is when you combine it with not only the insane breakpoints that you can hit by default, but then also the talents and the keystone that we have too. I think Marksman's Focus is sort of largely slept on for the most part. People seem to not quite understand how to play with it. And, you know, maybe it's worth me making a video on it at some point, but I just want people to know that it's... If you sort of path down that tree by default anyways, all you have to do is just look at this and understand that it's essentially just giving you free damage. For 1 point, this is such an insane investment that you have sort of no reason to not use it. If you're already going down here, it's like 2 points and you get extra reload speed, extra finesse power, and with the buffs you'll pretty much always have Marksman's Focus stacks. Obviously the sort of the activation for it is that you have to hit range weak spot kills in the first place, but I sort of hate to break it to you, but maybe that's sort of something that veterans should be doing in the first place. You should be aiming for heads. And here is a keystone that's incentivizing you to do it in the first place, which is cool. So let's see what sort of damage we can do with with our talents, our keystone, and our perks. Oh, okay. 2-shot a reaper, 1-shot a trapper, shotgunner, 1-shot a hound, potentially. No, 2-shot. Mauler, 1, 2, 3. 3, 4, 4-shot a crusher, which is pretty impressive. It's almost on par with how fast it was to kill crushers back when pinning fire was still disgustingly broken. But the difference is now is that all of your sort of damage is tied behind aiming for a weak spot in the first place, not just mag dumping. Let's check a rager. Probably 1-shot it, I think. No? 2-shot. 1-shot the flamer and 1-shot this gunner. 2, 3. 3-shot the crusher. So something important to mention about this as well is that this is by no means perfect. Like I said before, this is just sort of what I want. But for 1 point, you could either take basically max uptime on marksman's focus stacks, which is a big boost to your overall damage because it's a lot more consistent at that point. I'm sort of like deftly attached to a lot of the talents they have here, but realistically you could swap this out, you could swap this out, you could swap this out. These two maybe a little bit overkill. You could even forego getting grenade regen entirely if you wanted to. And it works with shout too as well. You would do like largely a similar build, but with shout you would have native grenade regen because most people tend to path. You know, bang bang, you get your shout, you get your over toughness. So then you wouldn't need to take demo team. But yeah, you could take camouflage, which is basically perma uptime on these stacks, which is huge for your damage. And I might even show that off just because it's so strong. You could take camouflage, or you could take long range assassin, which could also potentially get you even more breakpoints. Like I feel like I've spent so much time showing off just how nuts this setup is already, but just for reference, if we are at max marksman's focus stacks, so we're at 10, you can see on the buff HUD bar, we've got max stamina, so we've got deadshot, we've got our ult active. Doesn't get us any new breakpoints, but I have a feeling it probably would for a crusher. Let me get my ultimate back here real quick, and I'll show you guys. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. So no new breakpoints, but you know, I mean, you can imagine just having that insane stack generation is also boosting the shit out of your reload speed too. So you know, like I see some people, they go volley adept and tactical reload. Well, you could do the exact same thing with this keystone as well, and this is giving you reload speed and finesse power, which is kind of actually sort of busted now that I think about it. But anyways, this is just sort of what I like to use. Hopefully that clears up some things regarding Bolter. I get tired of people who use it like the way that you used to, where you would just do this and you would walk up to a crusher patrol and about 3 crushers would be dead by this point. That's boring. I like the incentive with the weapon now to have to aim for weak spots in the first place, because I feel like that's what veterans should be doing. You should be encouraged to click heads and have fun in that way. It's not fun when you can just mass clear a screen, and there's too many abilities like that in this game currently that just completely destroy patrols. So hopefully that helps somebody out anyways. Bit of like an unstructured video, but that gives you an idea of what sort of breakpoints you can reasonably achieve, even without, you know, discussing talents. You're free to run whatever you want, and I'm sure there would be different breakpoints that you could hit with focus target, for example. I don't touch this keystone ever, just because I think it's lazy. Like, okay, you just tag an enemy and you get free damage. Which is kind of just boring, really. But, you know, a lot of people use it, so that would potentially get you some cool breakpoints as well. But, yeah. No, hopefully that clears up some things. Please just don't mag dump with the bolter. It's all you have to do really is just look at the patch notes and go, oh, so they buffed the finesse values. This obviously means that the way that I use the weapon now sort of might end up changing. And the good news is, for people who enjoyed mag dumping with the bolter, you can still do the same thing on Zealot. And it's still just as busted as ever. Dance of Death and Blazing Piety, or Momentum and Anoint in Blood, those talents and those keystones all feed into making Bolter an absolute killing machine, like a hip fire monster that can just decimate shotgunner and mauler patrols. It doesn't quite hit the insane time to kill that old Bolter did against Crushers, for example, but I mean, is that a bad thing? Like, in my eyes, these Ogryn type enemies, they really should be actually quite tanky and quite hard to kill. These guys need to be scarier, because at the moment they're sort of, yeah, this is just sort of whatever, right? Like, I can just do this and he just sort of takes it. I will try and include a brief little demonstration of brittleness with Bolter as well, and why it's perhaps not worth using, but regardless, thanks for watching. Yeah. Enjoy using Bolter the correct way, if you want. Yeah. So as you can see here, I've sort of put together a, if I was going to mag dump with a Bolter, this is what I would use. So we have Shattering Impact, which is giving us obviously brittleness, and Pinning Fire, we've got Flak Unyielding. We have Executioner's Stance with the bigger they are to highlight Ogryns. We've got Close Range Damage, we have Rending, Bring It Down, Elite Damage, Marksman, Weak Spot Damage for the Emperor, Focus Target. And I want to just use this as an opportunity to showcase why I think the mag dumping playstyle is sort of dead in the water. So check this out. It's not that efficient. That, you know, you think about how quickly a revolver, for example, would do the exact same thing. It's essentially just a waste of shots. It really is. Like 4 shots to kill a Crusher. I could do the exact same thing and not have to... I could do the exact same thing with Marksman Focus, but not have to build entirely around a playstyle that just kind of sucks. And the issue with this as well is that your other breakpoints become so much worse. You do less damage to Maniacs, for example. It's just like, you know, it could be really, really good for bosses, for example. Like, we can have a look at the Beast of Nurgle damage. He's got 8 focus target stacks. Yeah, so we're one-shotting, like, we're killing a boss and a whole mag. But, you know, your time to kill on pretty much every other enemy is going to be pretty miserable. Bolter does not struggle to kill any of these enemies anyways. But, you know, if that's how you want to build the weapon instead, you can. Just be aware that you're going to be going through a lot of ammo. A lot of ammo, man. Yeah.